Welcome to another deep dive today,
Yeah.
where we're going beyond just reading Kristin Hannah's The Women, and we're going to explore the nuances of its audiobook experience on Audible.
Right. It's not just about the story itself,
Yeah,
but how the audio format, the narrator's performance, all those elements can really enrich and even change our understanding of the narrative.
exactly. And speaking of Kristin Hannah,
Yeah.
she's basically a household name
Oh, for sure.
when it comes to historical fiction, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, The Nightingale and The Four Winds
Huge.
were huge E.
Yeah,
And now The Women is following suit,
definitely.
even becoming a Sunday Times bestseller and getting ready for the big screen.
What's so fascinating to me about her work is
Yeah.
how she taps into these often overlooked aspects of history
Yeah.
and brings them to life.
Mm-hmm.
In The Women, she tackles the Vietnam War,
Okay.
but specifically through the eyes of the women who served,
Right.
a perspective we rarely hear about.
Okay, so for those of you listening,
Yeah.
the story follows Frankie McGrath,
Mm-hmm.
a young woman living a pretty carefree life on Coronado Island in 1965.
Right.
But everything changes
Yeah.
when her brother is sent to Vietnam.
And that's where Frankie makes a decision
Yes.
that really sets the story in motion, driven by this mix of patriotism
Yeah.
and wanting to be closer to her brother. She joins the Army Nurse Corps,
Wow.
leaving behind her sheltered life for the harsh realities of war.
It's a complete 180, right?
It is.
From sunny beaches
Totally.
to the front lines of a brutal conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And this drastic shift really sets the stage for the first part of the book.
What Hannah does so brilliantly is she doesn't shy away from depicting the horrors of war.
Right.
But at the same time, she shows this incredible strength and resilience of these women serving there.
Yeah.
And it's this stark contrast, this balancing act that makes the story so compelling.
And it's not just the writing, right?
Right.
We have to talk about the audiobook's narrator, Julia Whelan.
Oh, yes.
She's not just any voice actor, she's a Golden Voice awardee,
That's right.
known for bringing emotionally charged stories like this one to life.
And from what reviewers are saying,
Yes.
she doesn't just read the words. She embodies these characters,
Yeah,
especially Frankie. They say she captures the emotional turmoil, the fear, the strength in a way that really immerses you in the story.
It's like she adds a whole other layer of meaning to the text, right?
Exactly. Think about it. She's a seasoned performer,
Mm-hmm.
and she's likely making very deliberate choices about pacing tone, even subtle shifts in her voice,
Oh, yeah.
to bring out all these different emotions and nuances.
Yeah.
That's something you just don't get from reading words on a page.
Absolutely. And to top it off,
Yeah.
there's an author's note
Oh, wow.
read by Kristin Hannah herself.
That's awesome.
It's like getting a behind-the-scenes glimpse into her thoughts and inspirations for the book.
It creates this very intimate connection
Yeah.
between the author, the narrator, and you, the listener. You're not just hearing the story.
Yeah.
You're being invited into its creation.
So the book's divided into two parts.
Okay.
The first part focuses on Frankie's time in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and then bam.
Uh-huh.
The second part hits you with her return to America.
Yeah.
And that's where things take a pretty shocking turn.
Because you'd think coming home
Yeah.
would be this joyous occasion, right? But for Frankie and for many of the women who served in Vietnam,
Yeah.
it was anything but.
Yeah.
Instead of being welcomed as heroes, they faced a society that downplayed
Wow.
or even outright denied their service.
It's hard to believe, right?
I know.
Some institutions even went so far as to claim that women didn't even serve in Vietnam.
It's unbelievable.
It's like their sacrifices were completely erased.
This erasure really gets to the heart of the societal context of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just about forgetting.
Yeah.
It was about deliberately minimizing women's roles in the war. And I think it reflects a much deeper cultural resistance to acknowledging their contributions and the challenges they faced,
Right.
reintegrating into a society that had very specific ideas about what women's roles should be.
And this denial wasn't just a historical footnote.
No.
It had a real and lasting impact on these women's lives.
Absolutely.
They came home carrying not just the physical and emotional scars of war,
Right.
but also the burden of having their experiences invalidated.
It's almost like a double trauma.
Yeah.
The trauma of war itself,
Right.
and then the trauma of being silenced,
Oh.
of having your reality questioned.
And this is a central theme
Yes.
that Hannah explores in the second part of the book.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges these women faced trying to rebuild their lives
Yeah.
in a society that wasn't ready to acknowledge their service.
Mm-hmm.
A society that in some ways had already moved on.
And that leads to a whole other set of questions.
Like what?
How do you heal when your wounds aren't even recognized?
Right.
How do you find your place in a world that doesn't seem to have space for your experiences?
Wow.
These are the struggles that Frankie grapples with, and they're struggles that many veterans even today can relate to.
It's a heavy but important topic, and I think it's something that resonates even more strongly.
Yeah.
Because of the way Julia Whelan brings it to life through her narration. You can hear the pain, the frustration, the resilience in her voice.
It's not just a story, it's an experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's what sets this audiobook apart. It takes you beyond the words and immerses you in Frankie's world, her emotions, her struggles.
And before we dive into the book's reception and how this all connects to you listening,
Yep.
I think it's important to emphasize that this isn't just a fictional account.
Right.
It's rooted in the real experiences
Exactly.
of women who served in Vietnam. Hannah did extensive research.
Oh, yeah.
Interviewing veterans, delving into historical archives to ensure that she captured the authenticity of their stories.
It's not just a good story. It's a testament to their courage, their sacrifice,
Yes.
and their often unsung contributions to the war effort.
Exactly. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how the book tackles these themes, how critics have responded, and how it might resonate with you,
Okay.
even if you've never experienced war firsthand.
One of the things that struck me was how abruptly Frankie's world shifts when she returns home.
Right.
You know, one minute she's in the thick of it in Vietnam,
Yeah.
surrounded by the intensity of the war zone, and then the next,
Yeah.
she's back in this almost surreal normalcy of life on Coronado Island.
It's like going from 100 miles an hour to a sudden standstill.
Exactly.
And you can almost feel that jarring transition
Yes.
through Julia Whelan's narration.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a change in setting.
Right.
It's a shift in her whole emotional landscape.
It is, and it's made even more jarring by the fact that,
Yeah.
that no one around her seems to understand what she's gone through.
Oh my,
Even her own father acts like she was on vacation in Europe for 2 years.
it's almost like a form of gaslighting, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, she's dealing with the trauma of war,
Right.
but she's also being told that her experiences aren't valid,
Yeah.
that she should just pretend they never happened.
And that's where the bond between Frankie and her fellow nurses, Ethel and Barb,
Yes.
becomes such a lifeline. You know, they're the only ones who truly get it,
Right.
who've shared the same horrors and the same silences.
Their friendship is one of the most powerful elements of the story.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it speaks to a broader theme that Hannah explores, the strength and resilience of women in the face of adversity.
Absolutely. These women have gone through hell together.
Right.
And they come out on the other side with this unbreakable bond, this fierce loyalty to one another.
Yeah.
It's a real testament to the power of female friendship, especially in a society that often tries to pit women against each other.
And it's not just about emotional support, right?
Right.
They also challenge each other.
Yeah.
They push each other to confront their demons and fight for what they deserve.
You see this especially in the second part of the book,
Okay.
when they start to speak out about the lack of recognition for women veterans.
Mm.
They refuse to be silenced. They demand that their sacrifices be acknowledged.
And that leads to some really interesting discussions
It does.
about the contrasting viewpoints on women's roles in the war.
Right.
On the one hand, you have this prevailing narrative
Yeah.
that women were there to comfort and support, to be angels of mercy. But then you have Frankie and her friends
Right.
who are performing life-saving medical procedures,
Yeah.
witnessing horrific injuries, dealing with the same dangers as their male counterparts.
And that clash of perspectives really highlights how the book challenges that traditional narrative of the Vietnam War.
Right.
It's not just about adding women to the story. It's about fundamentally changing the way we understand their contributions and the impact the war had on them.
Now, I know some critics have pointed out that the second part of the book
Yeah.
delves into some pretty heavy emotional territory,
Yeah.
bordering on melodrama at times. But personally, I think that intensity reflects the reality
It does.
of what these women were going through.
Absolutely.
They were dealing with PTSD, with the loss of friends, with the struggle to reintegrate into a society that didn't understand or appreciate their sacrifices.
And I think that's where Julia Whelan's narration really shines. She doesn't shy away from those raw emotions.
Yeah.
She embraces them. She gives them voice and depth. You can hear the pain, the anger, the vulnerability in her delivery.
Wow.
And it makes those scenes all the more impactful.
It's definitely not a light listen,
No,
but it is a powerful one.
absolutely.
And I think it raises some important questions about how we as a society treat our veterans,
Yeah.
especially those who've been marginalized or forgotten.
Exactly. And in that sense, I think the book has a lot to say about contemporary issues as well.
Like what?
We've seen similar challenges with veterans of more recent conflicts.
Yeah, okay.
The struggle to get proper health care, to deal with the psychological toll of war,
Right.
to find their place in a society that often doesn't understand their experiences.
And let's not forget the parallels to healthcare workers
Yeah,
on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic.
absolutely.
They faced similar risks, similar emotional exhaustion,
Yeah.
similar struggles to have their sacrifices recognized.
It's a reminder that the themes of this book, the ideas of courage, resilience, and the importance of honoring those who serve,
Yeah.
they transcend time and circumstance.
One detail that really stuck with me, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this,
Yeah.
was the graphic nature of the medical descriptions.
No.
I mean, Hannah doesn't hold back.
Right.
She paints a very vivid and sometimes unsettling picture of what these nurses witnessed and had to deal with on a daily basis.
I think it's a deliberate choice and a powerful one.
Mm-hmm.
It forces us to confront the brutality of war, not just in the abstract sense, but in the very real, visceral details.
Yeah.
It reminds us that these women weren't just bystanders. They were in the thick of it, performing life-saving procedures,
Yeah.
dealing with horrific injuries and facing the same dangers as their male counterparts.
It challenges the notion that women's roles in Vietnam were somehow less significant, less impactful.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the most important takeaways from this book.
Mm-hmm.
Both the text itself and the way that Julia Whelan brings it to life
Right.
through her narration.
Yeah.
It forces us to reconsider our assumptions,
Well.
to confront the complexities of history, and to honor the courage and sacrifices of those who have often been overlooked or forgotten.
And speaking of honoring those who served,
Yeah,
you mentioned earlier that Kristin Hannah did extensive research for this book,
I did.
including working closely with Diane Carlson Evans,
Yes.
the founder of the Vietnam Women's Memorial
Mm-hmm.
in Washington, D.C.
That collaboration is crucial.
Mhm.
Evans, a former Army nurse herself,
Yeah.
played a pivotal role in ensuring that the contributions of women in Vietnam were finally recognized.
Wow.
It was a long and hard-fought battle.
Yeah.
But her efforts, along with the voices of countless other women veterans,
Mm-hmm.
led to the creation of that powerful memorial.
And in a way, Hannah's book serves as a literary counterpart to that memorial,
I think so.
bringing these stories to a wider audience
Right.
and ensuring that they're never forgotten.
It's about giving voice to the voiceless, honoring the unsung heroes, and reminding us that history is not just about dates and battles,
Right.
but it's about the lives that were shaped, the
Yeah.
sacrifices that were made, and the legacies that endure.
And one of the things that makes this audiobook particularly special
Yeah.
is the inclusion of Kristin Hannah herself reading the author's note.
Oh, wow.
It's like getting a personal message from her,
Yeah.
a glimpse into her heart and her motivations for writing this story.
It adds this layer of intimacy, this direct connection. Right.
Between the author and the listener.
And in that note, she talks about how this story was initially rejected by her editor back in 1997.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, her editor felt that the world wasn't ready for this story,
Why?
that it was too soon, too raw. But Hannah kept coming back to it, drawn to the untold stories of these women.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the COVID-19 pandemic hit,
Oh, wow.
with all its parallels to the Vietnam era,
Right.
that she felt compelled to finally write the book.
It's as if history had to catch up to the story
Yeah.
for it to truly resonate, for people to be ready to hear it and to understand its relevance.
And thankfully it did.
Yes.
The Women has become a bestseller,
Mm-hmm.
sparking important conversations about history, sacrifice, and the often overlooked contributions of women in the military.
Yes.
And I think the audiobook with Julia Whelan's incredible narration adds an extra layer of depth
Mm-hmm.
and emotional resonance to the experience.
Absolutely. It's not just a story you listen to.
It's a story you feel, a story that stays with you long after you finish listening.
And now for those of you listening,
Yes.
we want to open up the discussion even further.
Mm.
What stands out to you as the most impactful element of this audiobook?
Mm.
You know, I'm always curious to hear your perspective on these deep dives.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
For me, it's the contrast between Frankie's initial idealism,
Mm.
that almost naive belief in the glory of serving her country,
Right.
and then the harsh realities she encounters both in Vietnam and upon her return.
Right.
That shattered idealism, the way it just chips away at her spirit,
Yeah.
really fuels her emotional journey throughout the whole story.
It does. And I think that resonates with so many people. who've
Yeah.
had similar experiences, whether it's in the military
Right.
or in other challenging situations where the reality just doesn't match the expectation.
Exactly. And I think it speaks to a larger societal issue as well.
Okay.
This tendency to romanticize certain experiences like war without fully acknowledging the human cost. Yeah.
The trauma, the long-lasting effects on individuals and communities.
And I think the audiobook format with Julia Whelan's performance really brings that disillusionment to life.
Oh, it does.
You can hear it in her voice, the shift from youthful enthusiasm
Right.
to weariness,
Yeah.
the moments of doubt and anger.
Mm-hmm.
It adds this visceral layer to Frankie's experience that I don't think I would have gotten from just reading the text.
Absolutely. She doesn't just narrate the story.
Right.
She embodies it, conveying the emotional nuances, the subtle shifts in mood, in a way that truly immerses you in Frankie's world.
Reading through the reviews, I noticed that a lot of listeners were surprised by the depth of the story.
Yeah.
They went in expecting a more traditional war narrative,
Right.
but they came away moved by the portrayal of female friendship, the resilience of these women, and the lasting impact of trauma, even decades later.
It's a reminder that war stories aren't just about battles and strategies. They're
No.
about the human stories.
Yeah. The individual journeys, the scars that remain long after the fighting has ended. And in this case, it's about highlighting a perspective
Right.
that's often been overlooked in historical accounts of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
The experiences of women who served.
It's a powerful act of reclaiming those narratives.
It is.
Giving voice to those who were silenced or ignored, and challenging us to re-examine our understanding of history.
And it connects to a larger conversation about
Yeah.
the roles women have played and continue to play in all aspects of society.
Right.
The women challenges us to consider how those roles have been perceived, valued, and often undervalued throughout history.
One of the things that Kristin Hannah mentioned in a video we watched is that she hopes this book will inspire more conversations and more stories
So that's great.
about the experiences of women in Vietnam.
Yeah.
She sees it as just the tip of the iceberg, a starting point for uncovering this wealth of untold stories.
And I think that's a crucial point. We need to move beyond simply adding women to existing narratives.
Right.
We need to actively seek out their stories, create spaces for them to be shared, and listen with open hearts and minds.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Women audiobook,
Yeah.
let's leave you listening with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
How can we ensure that the contributions of women in the military and in all spheres of life are fully recognized and honored, not just in retrospect,
Right.
but in the present moment?
That's a great question. It's a question worth reflecting on, and one that we hope this conversation has sparked for you.
Yeah.
We encourage you to share your thoughts on this audiobook in the comments below.
Please do.
We'd love to hear your perspective and continue this dialogue.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more explorations of fascinating topics, untold stories, and thought-provoking discussions.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening.